Hi guys, I want you to watch this clip for me really quick.
Morgenthau! Let's finish this.
I didn't mean to kill your friend. I don't want to hurt people that don't matter.
You don't think Lamar's life mattered?
In this clip, you are supposed to root for the ginger-haired girl, and you are supposed to hate this guy. That's right, the ginger-haired girl who runs this terrorist organization who murdered this man's best friend. She says that she didn't mean to murder him. She doesn't kill people who don't matter. She said that the guy doesn't matter. And of course, John Walker, the person she's talking to, the one whose best friend her terrorist organization murdered from one of her plans, he says, you think that he didn't matter? But we are supposed to be on the side of the ginger-haired girl. We are supposed to see her, at the very worst, is an entirely sympathetic villain. We are supposed to be sad later on when she dies. She even gets a fantastic carry-off by the lead character in this show, something that was not given to the best friend character who was killed off. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of John Walker, an interesting case of a character that the MCU has just decided to be this outright punching bag that they are desperate for you to hate, and I just don't understand why. Now, going into this video, I understand that most people might not understand what I'm talking about, because most people did not watch the Disney Plus shows, because Disney Plus was this era for Marvel where they assumed that they were going to be able to keep up the same momentum that they had going into the movies by making all of these spin-off TV shows from the characters from those films, and that would make a thriving streaming service. But thriving streaming service it did not make. In fact, as has been recently said, the MCU is going to stop with their TV division. Now, by that I don't mean that Marvel isn't going to have any more TV shows on Disney Plus. It means that they're not going to make any more movies directly tying into that universe that you have to watch in order to understand the movies. There's not going to be any more movie characters that come over into the TV shows and vice versa, and that is a relief. But it is absolutely crazy to look back at the kind of shows that they put out on this streaming service. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that I did not have the positive response to Thunderbolts that some other people did. A lot of people thought it was all right, you know? But then there's still other people screaming that Marvel is back. But I did not have that positive experience with the film on a first watch. And I want to tell you one of the reasons why. There is a lot of baggage to the MCU still. Just a lot of baggage, a lot of horrible things that they did in the past, and a lot of those things are still perpetuated. And one of the things that I did not like about this movie was their continued treatment of the character of John Walker. Now, surprisingly, I saw some people who saw the movie who said that they actually liked John Walker as a character, and I couldn't understand why, because if you know the context of who this character is and how he keeps being hated on by these movies and desperate for the audience to hate on them, then you would probably have the same experience I did and hate what they did with him in the Thunderbolts film. But while there's been other videos out there going through the history of this character and why he really did nothing wrong at all in this universe, I want to answer the question, why? Why do they want me to hate John Walker so much? Why is this character the MCU's punching bag? Now, once again, to give you some context, John Walker as a character was introduced in the Disney Plus show Falcon and Winter Soldier, and this is the setup for his character. Falcon gives up the shield. He doesn't want to be Captain America, and as is explored in the show, it has to do with how he feels about that as a black man in America taking on the shield. That is what they made it to be in Falcon and Winter Soldier, contrasting the end of Endgame. So what happens is the government selects a new Captain America to give the shield, and they give it to this guy who has 3 medals of honor, and he has been just incredible person in combat. He is this incredible soldier. He's presented as he has a family that loves him, a wife and a child. He has a best friend named Lamar, who is going to be his sidekick on his missions as Captain America, and they have a great relationship that goes back a long time to having combat history with each other. But John Walker is obviously pretty nervous about being Captain America. Those are huge shoes to fill, but he wants to just do the best job he can possible. His biggest flaw here is about how nervous he is to take on this role and what it means.
So you always wanted to be a hero?
I liked that what I was doing would make people feel safe. Steve Rogers was the kind of guy who could do that.
He gave me hope.
Now, you might think that this sounds like a perfectly fine character, but from the beginning, they want us to hate him. Now, why? Why would I say that they want us to hate him? There's nothing that I've said about him that sounds bad. Well, from the beginning, from how the main characters of the show react to him, Bucky and Falcon, from the musical cues and the way things are framed, they want you to hate this character. They portray him getting the shield as a bad thing.
Welcoming your new Captain America.
When he first meets Falcon and Winter Soldier in the show, they are just kind of a jerk to him. He wants to help out. He wants to even work with them, but they treat him like he's a piece of garbage, like he's done something wrong, like he's stolen the shield or he doesn't deserve it. It's really confusing because while one might say that there can never be another Steve Rogers, this guy has everything in the show of the context saying that he is a good guy and he wants to do the right thing. And he's trying to be that way, but the music is constantly playing it up like it's villain music, like we're not supposed to like him, and our heroes are mistreating him constantly, acting like he's a bad guy and that this is a bad thing, and it makes utterly no sense. The shield was not taken from Sam. He let it go and they gave it to somebody else. Now, to speed up this conversation a little bit, what happens later on in the show is John Walker, crippled under the expectation of being Captain America, takes a super soldier serum. As you know, that is supposed to enhance people's senses. Is it going to make him a worse person? Well, what happens is there's a kerfuffle where John Walker and his partner Lamar are fighting off the terrorists in the show. The terrorists in the show who have killed innocent people that they justify, yet the show really wants you to sympathize with. What happens is Lamar is murdered by one of the terrorists. So John Walker runs after this terrorist who is still aggressing him in this situation and winds up killing the terrorist. And this scene of John Walker killing the terrorist who murdered his best friend is framed as if he is this evil psychopathic villain. It's really framed in a dark way with the music and the camera angles and everything, as if this is a sociopath who has just murdered an innocent man. But this terrorist already killed many innocent people, threatened to kill him, would have killed more innocent people, and murdered his best friend. Now, I don't have a problem with where the show went next in saying that there would be people who would see this as a bad thing, because in real life there are so many situations that you would think are cut and dry and everyone would agree on, but people frame it as a bad way. People make their own narrative and everything. I don't have a problem with the universe saying that this scene was caught on camera of Captain America killing someone and that was taken in a bad way by some people. But the way the show frames it is that John Walker is now this unhinged, evil villain. They make Falcon and Winter Soldier confront him and attack him and say, give us the shield right now or we'll take it off you. And it's this really awful confrontation where they beat up John Walker and then just leave him there after everything that has happened and take the shield from him. But then, despite them wanting to frame this as a horrible thing, we get this great scene next of John comforting Lamar's family after he died. And it's this really wonderful scene that shows the empathy of John Walker and how much he meant to this family and how much this friendship, the one that he lost, meant to him. Yet, they still want you to think that John Walker is this awful person. They are constantly framing this as somehow being in a negative light, this somehow being farcical or something. And what we see in the end of the show, and I'm just going through it in a speed run, is that John, without the Captain America shield, still tries to help people. He still tries to stop the terrorists, and he still tries to do the right thing, even without the shield, even though he's been disgraced. Yet, they still want you to see John Walker as the bad guy. And they want you to see the girl whose team of terrorists was responsible for murdering his best friend as the actual sympathetic one who gets the big carry-off. And you need to stop calling them terrorists. And she was just so sympathetic. Well, the scenes of John Walker are constantly framed with music to give you the cues that this is a bad guy and you should hate him and he's just the big jerk. The scenes with this ginger girl terrorist are framed where you're supposed to think that it's sad that she died. Aren't you sad that this terrorist who is killing innocent people for the right reasons was killed? So that was John Walker in Falcon and Winter Soldier, a guy who literally did nothing wrong, but everything from the camera angles and the way the main characters treated him and the music and everything is telling us that you are supposed to hate this character. Now, Disney Plus shows were Disney Plus shows, and you might be saying that now, hey, the MCU has changed. They don't want to go that direction anymore. And I would love to believe that, but then we get to the Thunderbolts. Now, to have John Walker on a team that is going to become the new Avengers, spoilers for Thunderbolts, well, they spoiled it themselves, you would think that this was them kind of walking back on the negativity towards his character and wanting to give him a little bit of redemption. Perhaps that was the whole reason why they made all these good qualities, is they don't actually want you to think that this is a horrible guy. But no, that is actually not the case going into Thunderbolts. In Thunderbolts, as was revealed by some of the original scripts, they had originally intended for John Walker to be the villain of this movie. Maybe have a bomb attached to him, maybe blow up into the Red Hulk. And even though they ultimately didn't do that in the movie is doubling down on the direction that they did in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Now, John Walker honestly does not get much character development in this movie. That was one of my problems with it, is there is actually not a lot of character development in Thunderbolts. But what we do get on him is that it becomes the butt of a joke, like a punchline to point out that John Walker is a jerk. At one point, Sentry, the character, giggles to himself, how could John ever have been Captain America? He's just this big jerk, right? And then later in the movie, Yelena is having a meltdown, and Walker tries to calm her down and to say, don't take it out on other people, and she screams at him as a retort, you know you're a piece of crap, and so does your family. And it's also treated as kind of a punchline. And to give you a little context of what happened here is earlier in the movie, John Walker is looking over the ledge, and it's implied that maybe this guy is thinking suicidal thoughts. Maybe he's thinking of just throwing himself over. And he gets taken into Sentry's Void, and he has a flashback of his history, and he sees what happened apparently with his family and how they left him. He was sitting in a chair looking at his phone, and his child was literally right next to him within eyeshot. And his wife is wondering if he's watching the baby, and he says no. He says yes, and he's still looking at his phone. And then the wife comes in and is really berating him for not watching the baby and being in his phone, when the baby is literally right next to him within eye view. And then John Walker walks out on them and says, well, why don't you watch him? And it's implied that he is the reason why his family left him, when originally his family, was said to have a very loving relationship with his family. But now they've taken away that too, and they once again try to frame him in this horrible light, like he's a horrible dad and all of that, even though the audience can see in this scene, it's like, what exactly was he doing wrong? And it has to be his fault once again that this is happening, even though what we see in the previous show is that he was a good guy in his relationship, as all we could tell. But it's yet another time where John Walker has to be framed as the evil one who is the victim of his own demise because he is just such a piece of garbage, even though the audience is asking the question, exactly what has he done? They even say in the movie, this guy murdered an innocent man, when we know that is not the case, but they they do not give him a chance to plead his case in this movie. So between all of this, the framing of the original show, and then the idea that this guy was originally going to be the villain of the Thunderbolts, and then how the Thunderbolts just triples down as a movie on this guy, saying that he's a piece of garbage, never giving him a way to defend himself, never giving the actual context, treating the fact that he's a piece of crap and the characters know it and say it as just them saying the quiet part that the audience is supposed to think out loud and as the butt of a joke, when this character is implied to maybe even be suicidal. First of all, this is why I do not take Thunderbolts as seriously as an exploration of mental health as other people do. I don't think it does a great job of it, but it's also just why do you want us to hate this character so much? Why are you constantly framing him as this horrible man? Why is this guy seen as the worst thing in this universe, the worst character that you're supposed to hate? And they don't even really give him a resolution or any sort of redemption. He saves people in the movie, but if you watch the original show, he was always saving people, and they just didn't accept that he was actually a good guy. So I want to just ask the question, why do they want us to hate this character so much? And I think I have the answer. I think that when John Walker came on the scene in Falcon and Winter Soldier, he's, I think that they wanted to present him as this all-American good guy. He's got the blue eyes and the white skin and the blonde hair. And yeah, he is the one that the American government would want to be Captain America. And yeah, of course, his best friend Lamar is the black best friend who's the sidekick. I believe they were trying to make a very obvious statement on the world today and how, of course, people will accept Captain America having a black sidekick, but Captain America has to be the white guy, right? He has to be the blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy. I think that's the statement they were trying to make, and I think that's why it's presented with a lot of contempt. This is a bad thing. This is the entire point that the show is trying to make. First of all, I would like to say there are a lot of shows and superhero shows out there where you have a black lead. Marvel movies would not exist if it wasn't for the Wesley Snipes Blade movies working out. Literally, it was a movie with a black lead that got Marvel movies started in the first place. But second of all, this show destroyed its own point because then they allow Lamar to be killed off, and then they treat it like it was nothing. They want you to be on the girl's side whose terrorist organization killed him, and she said he didn't matter. They want you to be on that girl's side.
I don't want to hurt people that don't matter.
So it's if you were trying to make a statement there about how the black guy can only ever be the best friend or the sidekick, well then you are being hypocritical because now you yourself don't seem like you care about this character. But I think that is why there is so much resentment and contempt from those original writers to John Walker. They see him as a representation of everything that they hate, and they don't seem to have realized all of the attributes that have made him likable in the show. The idea that this guy has 3 medals of honor that he has pinned to his Captain America shield to keep himself going when he's defending himself, that makes him very likable. The writers seem to have self-inserted as the terrorist organization in the show.
You have to stop calling them terrorists.
Where the ends justify the means if it is their vantage point. But when they look at a character like John Walker, then killing innocent people who aren't even innocent is a bad thing. It's bad because he killed one of their own, apparently. But then, of course, getting into Thunderbolts, you don't have all of that context. You just have the idea that John Walker is supposed to be this big jerk who never deserved it. But if you look in the context of that show and what it was, it just doesn't work. For me, it just feels really bad that you take this guy who seems like a good guy who is trying to do his best, and then one way or another, you make everyone hate him and make him get undue punishment and try to put him in a worse and worse light when that actually isn't the reality, and keep coming up with these scenarios where he actually did nothing wrong to make him out to be this awful person. What it does is it speaks to more than just bad writing. Going back to Falcon and Winter Soldier, it speaks to the moral ineptitude of the people writing it, that they just had so much hate going into that show, and so much hate for this idea that they created John Walker to be, that they couldn't realize for a second how likable they had actually made him. These are elements that a lot of the audience actually liked. They couldn't even realize that they were being hypocritical for the own point that they were trying to make with that show, I guess. So it's just a really hateful thing when it comes to John Walker, because you just get the idea of the hate that went into the framing of his character in that original show. And even if that is not the intentions of the people who made Thunderbolts, I mean, it's kind of still there. Like, they're still running with that whole narrative. And when I look back and watch like clips from Falcon and Winter Soldier in order to make this video, I'm like, how did we ever get there? How did we ever get something like that that is just so messed up in its morality and how it sees the world? It sees the guy who avenged his best friend's death by killing a terrorist is the evil one, and that the terrorists are the good guys, and that some of that poison is still in the MCU to this day. Like, how did we ever get there? And so what I want to say in conclusion, going back to just my reaction to the Thunderbolts and everything going on with the MCU to this day, is like, we had gone to a really dark place with all of this stuff. It was more than just bad content. A lot of it was just straight up hateful. And I love the Marvel universe, and I do want there to be good things again, and I want to enjoy things. However, I think for me, like, the whole entire reason why I watch these awful Disney Plus shows is I was a super fan trying to keep up with everything. But then by doing that, I actually took away a lot of my fandom, because just how bad these shows were and how demoralizing they were. And that's why it's gonna take a lot more to bring people back on board than just a mediocre to okay Marvel movie in Thunderbolts, because some of that residue is still there for a lot of us. Thunderbolts, despite getting good reviews, is actually not doing that well at the box office. It's because you've spurned a lot of people. If you were really sincere about turning around like you say you are, then there's a long way to go. It was a perfect avenue in Thunderbolts to make John Walker's tragedy is that he's a guy who's always tried to do the right thing, but the world views him as a monster when he's not. That would have been a much better avenue to go through in this movie, and I wish that they took it. So I hope that there are people out there that are actually sincere about this universe changing and can continue in that direction, because we have a deep pit to climb out of with all of this stuff that they released beforehand. And we still have stuff like the Ironheart show, which I'm sure is going to be terrible, that is still back in that vein. But that's what I want to talk about now, and where I'm at and how I feel about the MCU. I want to enjoy Marvel projects again, but if that's ever to happen, then they still have a long ways to climb out of this kind of stuff. Let me know what you think in the comments if you agree or disagree on why they want us to hate John Walker so much. If you want to support this channel, please consider becoming a patron or a member. And thank you to all the patrons and members who are already signed up. And I will see you guys next time.